I'm Marc Dresner, and welcome to Partnerships TV, featuring the leaders and experts at the forefront of clinical trials and development. Joining us today is Donna Jarlenski. She is the Senior Director of Clinical Development Operations at Momenta Pharmaceuticals. Donna, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Why don't we get started with a little bit about orphan drugs and personalized medicine? How will the industry's increasing focus in these areas affect clinical development moving forward?
I've been working in orphan drug development and meeting unmet needs and for almost exclusively the last 10 years. And some of the things that we did in the very beginning that were seen as novel and maybe a little edgy and iffy are pretty much commonplace now in generalized drug development. I think most people agree that it does take about $1 billion to go from research and development to taking a drug to the market. And some people are estimating that by the end of this decade, that's going to be $2 to $3 billion. Certainly, that's not going to be very easily sustained, and some of these techniques and strategies from orphan drug development are going to have to be applied across the board to all kinds of drug development.
How has the partnering landscape changed as a result of this?
Gone are the days where one sponsor company works with one CRO during a development program, taking a drug to market. Even the common press outside of the trade press recently, some of the largest pharmaceutical companies are talking about their new experiments in drug design and development, where they're allowing smaller groups within their organizations to act as their own development organizations, not silo the way it used to be in the 90s and the 80s, but leveraging still the strengths of the major pharmaceutical company, but empowering smaller groups to actually do their own drug development and vie for resources and funding within their own companies. I really can't think of one colleague that I have who only works with one provider, one sponsor colleague who only works with one provider in a drug development program. Most of us work with 5 and 6 different niche providers. I think some of that has to do with the growth in technology in general, and every technology, not just drug identification and drug science, but all the technologies that come together to researching a drug and getting it to market. The knowledge base is so large that you can't rely upon one organization to know everything anymore. So we've certainly seen a lot of changes in that, and CROs have come up to speed. I think they offer compartmentalized services now. They've seen the need for that, and they even have systems in place where they can say from the very beginning that we are accustomed to working with multiple providers, people who do the same thing we do, and they've compartmentalized their work and their practices so that they can easily integrate with multiple groups. I ran a phase 3 program the last few years, and there were 12 different niche vendors working together, including the pharmaceutical company that had the IP.
Are you finding that these are strategic relationships in many cases, or are they more transactional based, conventional model?
Yeah, no, they're definitely strategic. Again, because no one group of people can really harness all the knowledge and the know-how to take a drug to market. And also, once you begin to work with these groups, and different groups come together, you don't want to reproduce that. So they become strategic from the perspective that you want to start working with people, have everyone understand the technology, understand the product itself, and carry that understanding in their growth, apply their growth to that product moving forward. I think it takes the concept of a virtual pharmaceutical company, or could take that concept to all new highs, whereas there could be a consortium of individual contributors who work together toward a product coming to market. So the product becomes the company, and all the individual contributors are supporting that particular drug's development. I think that's pretty futuristic, but I think it could come to pass.
Fascinating concept. Can you point to a specific therapeutic area, for example, that sponsors and CROs alike may want to consider perhaps as a model for drug development in light of the shifts that we've been discussing in orphan drugs and personalized medicine and so forth?
Sure. I think oncology is emblematic of that kind of model and what people could study. 10 years ago, when adaptive trials were fairly commonplace in oncology development, they were looked askance at by many of the mainstream drug developments, a little little hand waving motion, and maybe not quite to be trusted. And now there are whole enterprises that are developing the technology for adaptive trial design. I read recently, I don't know how credible this is, but it's certainly interesting to think about that over the last 8 years, there's been a 60% growth in niche providers in the industry. And if you look at what those people are providing to the industry, many of them have to do with the technology and the medicine behind oncology development. The NIH came up with its own adverse event grading scale, which is marvelous when it comes to interpreting and understanding cytotoxic drugs. It doesn't fit for all drug development niches, but it certainly is a concept that I think more and more drug development venues are beginning to explore. For example, rheumatology, immunology development.
What steps do you think that CROs and other providers can take to better accommodate sponsors? We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but as things are sort of shifting, as that landscape is changing.
Well, certainly sponsors owe a debt of gratitude to CROs for taking on the headcount burden, because that's how this all started. And I think that moving forward, CROs really need to begin better to invest in the growth and development of their personnel. Not to speak critically, but just to offer an observation. I think it's fairly common that people have the experience where what they thought they were partnering with in a CRO, what was provocative and alluring to work with a particular group, sometimes doesn't come to fruition when you're actually engaged in the product development and actually doing the work. And sometimes that has to do with emerging technology, and perhaps the technology wasn't quite as advanced as maybe it was portrayed to be. And sometimes it has to do with the technological understanding of the actual staff at the CRO. So it's one thing, and very important to make sure that CRO and niche staff understand GCP or GLP, GMP, depending on what service they're working on. But even more important, I think, now is technology is really running ahead of the rest of us, that people invest time in understanding at an ever-increasing level what they're offering, how to do it better. And I think that's kind of the gap right now that's missing between CRO, niche providers, and sponsor companies. And I think it's an appropriate way for CROs to begin spending some of their resources.
Are you optimistic about them catching up pretty quickly?
I am, because I think everybody recognizes that, and certainly people are vocal about what their needs are, and not just from the sponsor, but from the individuals employed at niche providers, and I think there's a recognition, an emerging recognition for the need for this.
Terrific. Well, you've given us a fantastic perspective, Donna, and I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And that concludes this episode of Partnerships TV. If you would like to learn more about the Partnerships in Clinical Trials Conference and Exhibition, the producer of this program, please visit us online at www.clinicaltrialpartnerships.com. Until next time, I'm Marc Dresner. Thanks for tuning in.